I just wanna see, I just wanna see the light. I just wanna see, I just wanna see the light. I just wanna see, I just wanna see the light. I just wanna see the light. Even if it makes me blind, I just wanna see the light. Breathe in, leave it all behind. I just wanna see the light. Even if it makes me blind, I just wanna see the light. Breathe in, leave it all behind. I just wanna see the light. 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 Even if it makes me blind, I just wanna see the light. Breathe in, leave it all behind. I just wanna see the light. Even if it makes me blind, I just wanna see the light. Breathe in, leave it all behind. I just wanna see the light. I just wanna see the light.
2023. Happy New Year. It's great. Hey, we're gonna sing a new song. Is that okay, since this is a new year? And there's this one part of the song, it's really, really important. It's very profound and deep. And we're all gonna sing the word correctly. Is that okay? Is everybody down? Okay, so what the word is yeah. Can everybody say yeah? All right, so the way I'll count you in, is it yeah? It is yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then you say yeah on what would be 4. Can we try it? Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Is this Sunday morning or is this rally? Are we getting rowdy? Are we getting raucous? Or all right, let me hear it. Let me hear a good yeah. Ready, guys? 1, 2, 3. Yeah! All right, here we go. We got it.
To belong.
me break in two. Find me standing strong on you. Jesus, I belong to you.
Come on. Hey, make some noise if you're excited to be at Rally tonight. Woo! Let's go. Hey, do me a favor real quick and find a seat for me. Find a seat. Just have a couple things I need you to know about real quick. Hey, first thing is this. If this is your first time hanging with us, I just want to say welcome. We're so glad that you are here. We're so glad that you're hanging out with us. It's going to be a blast. We're just getting started. We have so many fun things happening post-service tonight. Hey, let me get your attention real quick. Quiet down a little bit. Thank you. Hey, first thing I need you to know. Hey, Rally is awesome. We're having a blast. It's going to be an amazing night. But every single Wednesday at your campuses, we have small groups happening. Now, here's what's important about that. You are not intended to do life alone. You're not intended to do a relationship with Jesus alone. You need to be in community, surrounded by others where you can challenge each other, encourage each other, walk in life, have leaders, adults that care about you, want to pour into you. And so that's what happens every other Wednesday or every Wednesday after rallies. Is groups. And so come back next Wednesday. We're going to have a blast. We'll get you connected to a small group. It's going to be so much fun. Second thing is this, summer camp. Anybody like summer camp? I know. It's crazy to talk about, right? Because it's like cold and snowing and stuff. But summer camp, hey, we will have details, dates, information, what it's going to look like, what to get excited about before our next rally, probably within the next couple weeks. So be on the lookout for that. Start having the conversations with your parents. Hey, I want to go to camp. I got to be at camp. It's going to be amazing. You're going to want to be there. So be watching on our social media. Come to groups to find out that information. We will have summer camp details to you very soon. It's going to be a blast. But hey, I'm excited about tonight because Sean is going to be speaking to us. And hey, what he's talking about tonight, if I can just give me your attention just real quick. What he's going to be talking about tonight, I think, is something that all of us need to hear. It's going to challenge you. It's going to encourage you. It's going to help you as you start a new year. Man, maybe for you made a lot of new goals. You have some things where you're like, man, I want to change this in my life starting this year. Man, this is a place where we can have a conversation about what Jesus wants to do in and through our lives. And we're going to have that tonight. So here's my ask from you. Be respectful of those around you. Maybe you're here and you're like, I don't know if I care about anything that's going to be talked about tonight. I don't know if I really want to listen to it. That's fine. We're glad that you're here. But as best as you can, try not to distract those around you because maybe there's somebody sitting next to you who really needs to be here, really wants to hear what's going to be talked about tonight. And so as best as you can, don't get out of your seat and go to the bathroom 30 times. Don't sit on your phone and have your TikTok volume all the way. Be respectful. I really think the message today is going to be encouraging for you. But before we do that, our band's got a special song for you guys tonight. And so make some noise for the band.
There is a swelling storm, and I'm caught up in the middle of it all. And it takes control of the person that I thought I was, the boy I used to know. But there is a light in the dark, and I feel its warmth in my hands, in my heart. And why can't I hold on? It comes and goes in waves. It always does. It always does. We watch as our young hearts fade into the flood. Through the wind, down to the place we used to play when we were kids. The memories of a stolen place, and caught in silence, an echo lost in space. And it comes and goes in waves, it always does, it always does. We watch as our young hearts fade into the flood, into the flood. And freedom falling, a feeling I thought was set in stone, slipped through my fingers. I'm trying hard to let go. It comes and goes in waves. Oh, it comes and goes in waves, and carries us away. I watch my warrior disappear right in front of my eyes. Moments of magic and wonder, it seems so hard to find. Is it ever coming back again? Is it ever coming back again? Take me back to the feeling when everything was left to find. It comes and goes in waves, it always does. It always does. The feeling of falling, a feeling I thought was set in stone, slips through my fingers, trying hard to let go. It comes and goes in waves. Oh, it comes and goes in waves, and carries us away.
I got emotional listening to that song. Hey, what's up, Flatirons students? How we feeling? Feeling good? Okay, hey, if I haven't met you before, my name is Sean. I'm on the student team as well, and I'm just so excited to be here at Rally in 2023. But before I get into this, I have to do this. Can we give it up for our student directors at each of our campuses? Can we make some noise for them? When I think about our student directors like Chris, Marie, Michael, Aaron, TJ, Katie, and John, they are so incredible because all of your directors do what they do because they want you to know Jesus, because their lives have been transformed by Jesus and they want that for you in your life. And so they do so much work that you probably will never see because they care about you. And so what you need to know about me is I've lived in Colorado now for almost a year, being here at Flatirons. I've actually been in student ministry working with students for about 15 years, which is crazy. Like, how many of you are under 15? So I've been doing it, I feel very old right now. Okay, so I've been doing it for about 15 years. But before I got into ministry, my first job out of high school was actually catching shoplifters. Like, that was my job. Like, I got hired at 19 years old to catch shoplifters at a large department store in California where I'm from. And raise your hand if you're a 17 or 18-year-old in here real quick. 17. Imagine in like a year or two, a giant department store handing you handcuffs and a badge and telling you to protect the millions of dollars of stuff in the store. How would you feel? You would feel awful, okay? That's how I felt every day. And so one of these days, I'm working with my friend Ryan. It's late at night, store's about to close. We get a phone call for one of the women who works one of the registers, and she's like, hey, there's this lady, and she's stealing pillows. And we're like, what? Sorry, I didn't hear you right. Did you say she's stealing pillows? She's like, yeah, and like sheets and blankets. That's not a regular thing. And we're like, what? Like, who would steal that? And so we pick her up on cameras, and sure enough, we see this woman. She has this massive bag, and she's just shoving pillows and blankets and sheets into this huge bag. And we're like, yeah, she's for sure stealing. And so the way it works is one of us stays on cameras, and then one of us goes and waits by the exit because you can't stop them until they exit because you haven't stolen until you've walked out the store. I just taught you how to steal, sorry. So don't do that. But one of us waits out there, and so I'm watching her, and I remember she walks over to this huge display, had this thick plastic on it, and she pulls out this massive knife, and she begins to cut into this display so she can get like the most expensive blanket that we had, which it was like hundreds of dollars for this blanket. And I'm watching her do this, and what I see is the very weapon that's gonna kill me eventually. Like that weapon's gonna be the end of the Sean Lord story, okay? So I'm watching her, I freak out, I tell my friend Ryan I work with, like, hey, she has a massive knife, just a heads up, I'm gonna call the police to see if they can help. I call the police, they're like, hey, we're 45 minutes out. Great. So we're watching her, just praying. She takes 45 minutes to walk out of the store. She doesn't. She walks out a couple minutes later, and so she walks out the store. I have to wait till she exits, and then I just sprinted out of our office door to get to the exit to help my friend Ryan. And as I'm running as fast as I can, and it's the furthest exit away. I start hearing on my radio my friend Ryan screaming, help, help, stop, stop, just over and over again, the highest pitched I've ever heard his voice before, screaming at me to stop. I run around the corner. I guess what happened is she walked out. She had this massive bag in her hand. He stopped her and said, hey, excuse me, ma'am, I need to talk to you about the things in your bag. She dropped the bag, immediately went in her pocket and grabbed the knife, and he like just freaked out and just grabbed her wrists of her arms like this, so her hands were stuck in her pockets, and then he was just like, I don't know what else to do. And he was just standing there screaming, help, help, stop. And so I come around the corner and I see him like screaming, and she's like trying her best to get her hands out of her pocket to get this knife out. And I'm like, this really is the end of the Sean Lord story. And I walk up, and we're able to get her and handcuff her and stand her up, and she went from screaming at us, trying her best to get away. The second I put the handcuffs on, she looks at me dead in the face and she goes, I'm sorry. And I was like, that's not gonna work, okay? That's not gonna work, not today, okay? Not today, it's not gonna work. And she's like, no, I know I can't get out of it. Honestly, like, I'm sorry. I was like, are you messing with me? Like I couldn't tell the whole time. And so we walked back to the office, and it took like 45 minutes for the cops to get there. So I had 45 minutes just talking to this woman about her life. And the reason she was saying sorry is because she said, this actually used to be a large part of my life. She actually grew up in Australia. She flew out to the States to go to college. And then when she was in college, she developed an addiction. And pretty soon her grades started falling. She dropped out of college. She eventually had to start stealing to pay for this addiction that she had developed. And she started this pattern over and over again, which she would steal, get caught, go into jail, come out of jail, go back to stealing, steal. And then finally, she went to jail for 5 years. And she lost a large chunk of her life. She was in her 30s, and she lost 5 years of her life. And then she got out, and she said, this time's gonna be different. And for a year, she stayed clean. She got a job. She got her first apartment, and she got her life together. And then her mom heard about her getting her life together. She's like, I wanna come out and see you. Like, I wanna come out and see you and see how you're doing. And when she was getting her apartment ready for her mom to come over, she looked in her guest room, and her guest room was empty. And she started thinking, like, what will my mom think of me if I don't have like the best stuff in my room? And so she went back to her old ways, thinking this is the last time. And she went back and she stole all this bedding that she wanted to use in her mom's guest room. And the thing is, after talking with her for 45 minutes, I'm like, you know, your mom would rather have you not in jail than have a really nice blanket. Like, you know that, right? And she said, yeah, it's like I couldn't stop myself. And I stopped hundreds of people over the course of 5 years of doing this. I worked at one of the largest stores doing this. And that story stuck with me because I think a lot of us can relate to what she was feeling. Like, she made this comment towards the end as she was leaving, and she just said, I'm too far gone. And she went to jail, and I never heard from her again. I never know what happened to her. I pray that she's clean again, and she's working through it. But the reason it sticks with me is because that was like a real human moment that she was having with me, expressing that she felt like she had made so many mistakes and she had messed up once again, that she was just too far gone to ever be any different. And for me, that was my story when I was 20. I didn't become a Christian until I was 21 years old. And I remember thinking in so many moments that this is like, I don't know how I'm gonna fix all these things in my life. And it felt like I was too far gone. And when I became a Christian when I was 21, I started reading the Bible on my own. I thought the Bible in my head all growing up was just a bunch of TED Talks, like Jesus just giving like TED Talks to people, and then a bunch of like, and then him doing random miracles, and that's it. But the Bible is actually filled with multiple times where Jesus is interacting with women like this woman, or men just like this woman. Like he met people where they were at, in real depths of despair in their lives, and he gave them hope. And one of my favorite times that Jesus does this is in Luke 15. It says, before he even gets into the story, it says that he's speaking with tax collectors and sinners. Like it's emphasizing like, hey, when he's about to tell this story, the people he's telling it to are not church people. And in that culture, they probably felt lonely, they probably felt isolated, and they probably felt without hope. They probably felt like this woman of like, I'm too far gone. And it's in the midst of that Jesus says, hey, I know you're not church people, you probably don't even know who I am. Let me tell you this story. And he goes to tell this story that goes like this. It says, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. Now, again, this kind of misses us, like asking for his share of the estate. Like, what is that even? That sounds like a lawyer or something. Like, what is that? That kind of misses us in 2023 America. But back then in that culture, families were also like a business together. Like, it was normal for like the father of the household to have a business. Like, he was a farmer, he was a rancher, or maybe like they had some other business. And for you to be a son, you would eventually take over that business. And so when that father would eventually pass away, he would leave everything he had to his sons. And so this younger son goes to his father and says, hey, you know that inheritance that I'm going to get later on when you're dead? Give it to me now. And in that, like you could go to the Middle East today where Jesus is saying this, and that would be offensive today. Like people would still be offended. Like that's not what you do. And the father actually had no, like he didn't have to give him the money. He could have said like, what are you talking about? Get away from me. But instead he says, okay. And in a sense, the son is saying to the father, you're no longer my father. I don't want to live in this house. I want to go live on my own. It says he takes all the money that his father gives him. He takes it, he goes off to a distant country. He leaves his father's home, goes off to a distant country, and it says that he spends all of his money, and the word it uses is wild living, which if you were to look at like the original word that it's using, like whatever you'd imagine the worst things that you could do with a bunch of money you just got, he did those and worse. Like legitimately, like whatever thought, like what did he spend it on? Like all of that, and then also way worse. Like he just wasted this money on things that were not good for him, but he thought they would be. And so the story continues on. After he's left his home to find a new way to live, the story continues on. It says, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. And listen to this. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So a famine hits, which means there's a shortage on food, which not only means there's less food, but to get food means it's really expensive. And he now has nothing. He's taken everything he could from his father. He's spent it all. He has nothing. And he's sitting there and he realizes he only has one thing left that's worth anything. It's himself. And he sells himself so that he can live. The one thing he has left is himself, and he even sells that. And it says that he is so hungry and desperate for anything that he's actually thinking about eating the food that the pigs are eating. And I don't know if you've seen the food that pigs eat. Bro, it's like it's bad. He's very, very hungry. It's disgusting, and he's desperate. But then he gets a bright idea. It says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. And so he returned when he had nothing left. And here's the thing, like he does this thing that I think a lot of us do when we get in trouble. He started rehearsing a speech. Like how many of you guys like get in trouble a lot at home? Like you just can't listen. You swear you try, but you just can't. I remember, this is so dumb. I remember when I was a kid, one of the dumbest things I ever did, it was just so stupid, is I'm the type of, when I was a kid, I used to always throw a ball against a wall. I still do it. But like anyone else like that, like you just always have to be like throwing a ball or something, river, yeah. So I remember one time I'm at home, and all growing up, my mom would yell at me over and over again, no balls in the house, no balls. Anyone else have a mom like that? Hey, your mom loves you. That's why they're saying that, okay? She loves you. So I'm throwing the ball, and I'm not paying attention. I'm watching TV as I'm doing it, and I don't look, and I'm throwing it above our kitchen, and I throw it a little low, and above our kitchen, we had this like wood placard thing that said the Lord's Kitchen. My last name's Lord. The Lord's Kitchen. And I hit it, it fell off the nail and just shattered all over the floor. And it was that like, I'm dead. Like, I'm literally dead now. And so I do what most of us do when I get in trouble. I start rehearsing a speech in my head. Like, I have a chance right now that I can turn the tide on this. Like, when my mom gets home, if I have a good enough speech, I can maybe get out of getting grounded. So I remember so vividly like sitting there going, okay, this is what I'm gonna say. When my mom walks in the door, hey mom, have I told you how much I love you? Just like real quick. I feel like I don't say it enough because I love you that much. Like I can't even, love's not even a strong enough word. I love you so much. And here's the thing, I'm a young man. Young men make mistakes, but it's not about the mistake that we make. It's about how we respond to that mistake. Do we take responsibility? Like I started doing this whole speech, right? And she walks in, I tell her the speech, she says, you're grounded. And it didn't work at all. And I went to my room. I still think about it to this day, sorry mom. But that's what he starts doing. He's sitting there in this pigsty, living with pigs. And he goes, I have literally done one of the worst things I could do to my father. I've disrespected my father. I've brought shame on our house. Like our neighbors talk about him probably. Like he's thinking about like my neighbor, like my dad's embarrassed of me because of what I did. And so I had to come up with a really good speech. And so he says things like, oh, Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. Like, I've done the worst thing ever. Like, he's really trying. But he decides nothing can be worse than living here. I might as well come home. And his whole pitch to his father is going to be, hey, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. I get that. But you at least treat your employees better than this guy does, so can I at least work for you so I'm not sleeping with the pigs? And so as he walks home, imagine what that walk is like. Like, imagine just a little bit before, as he was walking to the distant country, dreaming about all the fun he's going to have, all the ways his life's going to change. He knows what's best for his life. What did his father really know? And here he comes walking back with nothing. And it's like every landmark that he passed on the way to the distant country, he's now passing, going back home. And it's like every neighborhood, every group of houses, every spot that he remembers seeing on the way out now serve as a reminder of every mistake he's ever made as he's walking back to his father's home, like the embarrassment he must feel. I was reading a book on this, and they were talking about in this culture, for him to lose everything, usually if they couldn't pay their debts, they would shave their head to show like the shame that they had because they couldn't pay their debts. Like he probably didn't have any clothes except for his underwear. Like he was coming back with nothing. So he walks back to his father's house, and as he turns the corner and he sees his home, he sees his father outside of his house, and it says that his father is running. And I don't know about you, I would think that father has a knife, and he's probably sprinting at me to murder me because of what I did. But this is how it goes. It says, as he turns the corner, he sees the house. It says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, he goes in the speech, remember? Goes in the speech, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father cuts him off mid-speech. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. And listen to this. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Notice where he cuts him off. He cuts him off right when he's about to offer himself as a servant. He's about to ask him, can I get a job with you? His father cuts him off and says, you are my son. And one of the most beautiful lines, he says, like, you were dead and are alive. You were lost, and now you're found. You're back home. He thought he was going back home to be a servant, and his father welcomed him back home as a son. Now, who is Jesus talking to when he's sharing this story? Do you remember? The tax collectors and sinners, the people who aren't church people, the people who might not even know who God is. He's sharing this story to them, and you have to imagine, as they're hearing this story, they're getting goosebumps because they realize Jesus is not just telling a beautiful story about a father's love for his son. He's telling a story about them. He's telling a story about me. He's telling a story about us. You see, what Jesus is trying to show is that this home that the son lived in, this represents the very beginning of all things, where God created humanity. He created everything that we see. He created us to live in a home with him for eternity, in relationship with him. It says in the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis, it says that God used to actually walk around with the first humans created. He used to walk around creation with them like us walking around next to each other, and he used to live life with them. But then they did what we have also the tendency to do, which is they left. They decided to live life on their own terms. And they found themselves going off to a distant country and trying to live their life away from the way that God created us to live. See, here's the thing. If God created us, and I really believe that God created each and every one of us, like uniquely, like he thought about each of us when he created us. If he created us, he must know what is best for us. That's the story. That's the story. God created us, and he knows what is best for us. He knows the best way to live to bring thriving life to each of our lives, the way that we can experience joy and happiness, the ways that we can love others and forgive others. Like, he knows what is best for us, and over again we say, I know better. And the Bible says that when we say, I know better, the Bible calls that sin. I don't know about you, I kind of have like a weird relationship with the word sin. Like, I feel like most of the time when I hear the word sin, it's usually from some random angry person as I'm walking into like a Rockies game or something, and they have some sign and they're screaming at me, right? Anyone else have that experience with the word sin? Yeah. What sin actually means is sin is like the word in Greek, the word actually is an archery term. And it means for you to miss the mark. Like, what sin is you trying to aim at a target, and the target being, I want a joy-filled life. I want a life that's good. I want a life of purpose. And sin is us saying, I know how I can get that, and we miss the target every single time. That's sin. Or I was talking to my friend Joseph last night. He was saying sin, beyond missing the mark, sin is like against the whole reason God created us. It's going against the very fibers of what we were created to be. That is what sin is. And what we see over and over again in the Bible is that we have this problem with sin. And what Jesus is trying to say is that every time we go off to the distant country and we step into the darkness of the distant country, we are entering into sin, and we find ourselves empty. We find ourselves wanting more. And Jesus is saying that no matter what you have done, no matter where you have gone, no matter how far you think you are, you can always come back home. And the way that the Father, that God sees you coming home, is he welcomes you and he embraces you as a son and as a daughter. That's a beautiful story. I was thinking about this the other day. It seems like sometimes we don't understand the fullness of God until we experience the emptiness of the world. Let me say that again. We don't understand the fullness of God until we experience the emptiness of the world. I don't know about you, but especially over this last season, as we entered into COVID, I hate even saying COVID, I hate that word now, but as we entered into COVID, you were reminded of how empty the world was. How like there was no joy to be found in the world that was sustaining. I think all of us felt this weird sense inside of us that something was wrong. I think the thing that breaks my heart the most when I think about not only your generation, but the current moment that we're in our culture, is that we can live our whole lives. We can live our whole lives thinking that we're living in a palace when we're actually living in a pigsty. Hear me out. Like, I think many of us, technology can distract us. Like, imagine if the son had a smartphone to distract him, where he can go on Netflix, and I'm sure you guys have had that feeling before, where like you're just sitting in your room and maybe you're not doing anything, and all of a sudden you start feeling this overwhelming sense of loneliness or dread, or you just start feeling really depressed. What do? You just pull out your phone, right? Like, you pull out your phone and you're like, just keep scrolling, like something will make me feel better, right? Or you text like 30 friends like right away, just like, hey, or like hit them up on Snap, like, hey, and just hoping someone responds to you to make, like, I know some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? We have this ability to distract ourselves from where we currently are. But if we're honest, when the phone's away, when the distractions are away, I'd be willing to bet many of you, when you're sitting alone, it's quiet, you're like, something's wrong. And my biggest worry is that we don't even realize it, because the reality is that most of us, it's not a sudden change to where all of a sudden we turn from God and we just run off and we run all the way to Oregon or something. Like, no, many of us, it happens more gradual than that. So here's actually something kind of crazy. You might not have noticed, we had a little light issue earlier, but did you notice that, can you turn on the lights of what they were when I first started my talk? This was actually right when I started speaking, this is what the lights were. And over the course of the last 10 minutes, can you go back dark again? Over the last 10 minutes, it's slowly dark into this, and you didn't even realize it. That's nuts. That's how it happens in our lives. That's oftentimes when I see in my own life, it's this gradual pull to where I find myself feeling more and more alone and isolated and not fulfilled, not happy. I'm like, what's going on? And I don't realize I'm living in the pigsty when God offers me a home to live in. So here's the thing. Not just the Son, Jesus wants to welcome us home. What Jesus does a lot is he uses this illustration of using light and darkness. Over and over again throughout Scripture, he talks about light and darkness. Darkness is the world and what the world has to offer, which is, think about when you're in darkness. I hate being in a dark room, right? Like, when you're in a dark room, you're scared. You don't know which way is like, I don't even know which way was forward. Like, I don't know where I am. I'm scared. I'm fearful. But he also says the light is when you're at home with the Father, when you're living with him and allowing him to guide you and to direct your life. Not saying, I know what's best for my life, but instead knowing, God, you created me. God, you created me. You know me better than anyone else in this room. Like, you know me better. How have you called me to live? How did you create me to live? And he calls us into the light. And here's the thing, I'm just going to speak for myself, and I'm sure all the leaders in the room who love Jesus, like, when I gave my life to Jesus, everything in my life changed. Everything in my life changed. I remember so vividly when I made a decision. I actually went to my mom when I became a Christian when I was 21. I went to my mom's house, woke her up, and said, because my mom loves Jesus, and I said, Mom, I want to become a Christian. She started crying. And I remember that by the next day, like, everything like looked different. It's hard to explain, but some of you, I think, understand what I'm saying here. And everything was different, and it was like I was experiencing living in the light. Everything now made more sense. I understood it. But I found myself still with this thing inside of me that still wanted to go back into the darkness. And I had to trust God over and over again and let go of those things and trust him that every time something was pulling me in the darkness, I knew God would not want me to be doing this over and over again. I would give that up and give that back to God and come back into the home. And this is one of the most beautiful things that happens when we do that. When we come back to God and we come back and live in the light, something powerful happens. Jesus says this in Matthew 5. He says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." That when we give our lives to Jesus, when we come back to the Father's home, we start experiencing the life that God actually created us to live, something happens. We start to become a light in a dark world. We become a light in a dark world. Like, how many of you guys have flown into Denver Airport? I'm assuming a lot of you have. I know every time I fly back over here, and I'm going over the mountains, it's just like an hour of darkness, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like you fly at night, you fly over the mountains and it's just dark and you're just like, where am I? Am I in space? Like, where am I right now? And then all of a sudden, you come over the mountains and you see in the distance the lights of Denver. And you start seeing the lights of the city. And I don't know about you, but when I see that now, I look at that and I'm like in my heart, I'm filled with like, I'm home. I'm coming back home. And there's hope because I see the lights in the distance. Jesus' method, God's method of saving humanity out of darkness is through you. It's through you. It's because in the dark world, what the world desperately craves and needs is light. And that when we give our lives to Jesus, we become that light that attracts other people back home into the life that God created them to live, that the lost are now found. The ones who feel dead now feel life. The ones who feel broken are now restored and made whole because they come back into the Father's home. I think what's so crazy about this is if you think back, social media is 15 years old. It's not old. We think like today, like the only way to spread information to people and tell people about something is through social media. 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. If you think about this, I'm a Christian today in 2023 because 2,000 years ago, someone gave their life to Jesus. They gave their life to Jesus, told someone about it, and that person gave their life to Jesus. Their life was radically changed, told someone about it, and that happened over and over again for 2,000 years until finally someone told my grandfather about Jesus, who then told my mom about Jesus, and my mom then told me about Jesus. Like, I'm experiencing the light that Jesus offers because of probably hundreds and thousands of people that led to me knowing Jesus. And here's the thing, that the beautiful picture is Jesus says that's actually his plan to save humanity. To save people from darkness is actually through you, and there's actually not a plan B. That's it. That's God's plan to restore humanity. And I think a lot of us miss that. And so I have two simple questions for you tonight. Two simple questions. The first one is this: will you? I actually didn't write this down. When I first started writing, like what I wanted to say to you, I'm praying to God, like, God, what do you want me to say? And I started feeling this pull of how many of your generation are hurting and struggling right now. Like when I think about back in camp was such an incredible week for middle school and high school camp. I got to meet so many of you, and so many of you opened up each night about what God was doing in your life and what you were walking with and what you were walking through and the ways that God met you in the midst of that. And I was like, man, what would this state look like? What would our schools look like? What would our homes look like if we were to actually take this seriously and shine the light into a dark world that needs it? I was like, imagine that. And then all of a sudden I had this feeling, like a couple weeks ago, I rewrote what I wanted to say because I was like, the only way that we can be a light in the world is if we allow Jesus to be the light in our life. Let me say, the only way we can be the light of the world, the only way we can make a change in a world is if we are first changed. That's the greatest tool to reach people for Jesus, is for you to actually follow Jesus. Not to what you post, not the special thing you craft. No, it's you actually being changed by Jesus. Because here's what happens. When you get changed by Jesus, everything about you changes. Paul says in the Bible that you actually become a whole new creation. You become a different person. And God starts to take away these things in you, this darkness that's still in you. He begins to take those things out, and people around you start to notice. They notice the way that you love people. Then they notice the way that you care for people. They notice the way that even though you know what's going on in the world and the world feels like it's falling apart right now, well, let's just grant that. The world feels like it's ending in some ways. You're able to still know what's going on, yet not lose hope. And people see that and they're like, what's different about this person is they've been changed by Jesus. And so I wanted to write this whole message about, hey, let's go be the light of the world. But before we do that, every one of us in this room first needs to come to Jesus. And for those of you in the room who feel like, man, I feel like I have. I feel like at camp, like something changed, and I've been following Jesus. I've been coming consistently and growing in a group, which, side note, the best way to keep yourself in the home and to stay a light is to be in a group and to not do it alone. The easiest way, I've been in this for 15 years, I can tell you right now, the people who say like, I don't need a group of people to help me walk in my faith, that person will not be a Christian in a couple years. I've seen it happen over and over again, that you were made to be in community. The second question is this. So first one's will you. The second question is this, will they? Will the people around you hear about Jesus? The reality is so many of the students that you are around, so many of your friends, your classmates, your teammates, maybe the weird neighbor that you still hang out with, but you hate it, right? But sorry, that one neighbor. The people around you, will they hear about Jesus? Will they hear about light in the midst of darkness? Imagine the impact we could have. Like, look around for a second. Imagine the impact we could have if each one of us made it our mission to say, hey, there's this one person in my life that I know doesn't know Jesus. There's this one person in my life that I know they feel like they're living in hell right now because everything seems to be going wrong. They feel like that woman that I shared about, they feel like they're too far gone. They're just like, what's the point? Like, what would it look like for you to come in and to talk about heaven? To say, hey, actually, when Jesus talks about heaven, he doesn't just talk about some far off time. He actually talks about now. You can actually experience life. You can experience heaven now if you'd be willing to come back to the Father's home. And so I want each of you to think about who's the one person right now, who's the one person in my life that maybe that person's already popped in your head. I'm going to make it my mission to love them and to show them the light of Jesus. But I'd be willing to bet many of you, before you do that, you first need to have a moment during this song right now to say, hey, God, I've been living a life my own way. I've been doing things my own way. I try to stop and I just can't seem to stop. I don't feel great about my life right now. I need to come back to the Father. And here's the thing. When you do that, picture that Father running to his Son. That's how God is wanting to meet you. And here's what I encourage you to do. If that's you tonight, I'd encourage you at some point tonight, find a leader. If you're in a group, then you know who your leader is. But if you're not, and this is your first time here, you can come find me. You can come find any of our directors, any of our leaders that are wearing shirts that say leader on them. Like, come and find us because we'd love to pray for you and encourage you so that you can experience the life that Jesus has for you. And so would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we are reminded of your love for us. God, what a beautiful picture that you have for us, that God, that you left heaven to come to earth so that we could come back into relationship with you, because God, you designed us to live in relationship with you. God, you know what's best for us. You know the best way to live. But we know that we oftentimes go and try to live life in our own way. And so God, I pray for everyone of us in this room right now that we would come home and that we would experience life with you. God, we love you and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
When death acclaimed its victory, the King of love had given up his life. The dark
that you were hanging with us tonight. We have an amazing night still ahead. So hey, here's what I need you to do. When you leave the room, we got pizza, we got donuts, and we got a silent disco in the back of the lobby. Head there, it's gonna be a blast. We love you so much. We'll see you next Wednesday.
I will be still. I will be still. And remember that I ain't in control. Give me peace surpassing all that I know.